Today, we're going to take a look at a history that, let's be honest, most of us only got a tiny, tiny piece of in school. We're going to build a completely new framework for understanding the huge, complex, and living story of Native peoples in the United States. Here's the year the stars fell, the year of whooping cough, the year the white soldiers attacked. Now, these phrases, they sound almost like poetry, don't they? Like lines from some ancient myth. But they're not myth. They are history, recorded. What you're looking at is basically a history book. It's a 71-year timeline for one single Native nation. And this is just one example. You have to remember there are hundreds of distinct nations, and every single one has its own deep, ongoing, and completely unique history. Okay, so here's our game plan for how we're going to unpack all of this. First, we'll look at why this history is so misunderstood. Then, we got to get our words right. After that, we'll tackle essential paradox, define a really key concept called settler colonialism, and finally, see how this whole new way of looking at things changes everything. So let's start with that first big question. Why do we even need a new framework in the first place? Well, it's because the way Native history is usually taught, it leaves these enormous holes in the story of the United States.
I mean, this quote from a student really just says it all. Can you imagine trying to understand the history of this country when the original inhabitants get about 3% of the coverage? It's not just a small mistake. It fundamentally warps the entire picture. 10 pages out of more than 300. When you see the numbers like that, it really hits you. This isn't just about missing a few facts here and there. It means an entire perspective is almost completely erased. And that's not just a misunderstanding of Native history. It's a misunderstanding of American history, period. So, if we're going to rebuild that understanding, we have to start with the basics. We have to start with the words themselves, because how people and nations identify themselves, well, that's incredibly important and full of history.
So let me give you a personal example. I'm a member of what most people call the Navajo Nation, but in our own language, we call ourselves Dene. It means the people. The name Navajo, that came from outsiders. Now, some Dene people use Navajo, some don't. And that's the key takeaway here. There's no single rule. The best and most respectful thing you can do is always use a specific nation's name if you know it. And that gets us to the big umbrella terms. American Indian, for instance. It's written into U.S. law, but come on, it's based on Columbus thinking he was in India. Then there's Native American. It got popular in the 60s, but again, the Americas are two whole continents, so it can get a little vague. The point is, neither one is perfect, which is why being specific is always the way to go. Now, the word indigenous helps us zoom out and see the bigger picture. It connects the experiences of peoples here in the U.S. to people like the Sami in Scandinavia or the Maya in Central America. It's this global term for peoples who have a deep, ancient connection to a land that was later colonized by outsiders. Okay, so this brings us to a really interesting puzzle. If there are hundreds and hundreds of unique Native nations, all with their own histories, how can we possibly talk about one single Native American history? It seems like a contradiction, right? And this slide lays out that paradox perfectly. On the one hand, it is absolutely true. There is no single monolithic Native American history. It doesn't exist. There are hundreds of them. But at the same time, all of these incredibly diverse nations are tied together by a set of very powerful shared experiences. So, what is that common thread? And here it is. This is the idea that unlocks the whole thing: settler colonialism. This is the force, the common thread that runs through all those different histories and ties them together. It's what has shaped the experience of Native nations in the U.S. for centuries. So let's actually define this thing, because it's not just a fancy academic term. It's a very specific kind of system with a very specific and pretty chilling goal. And getting this is the key to our entire new framework. Okay, check this out. Regular colonialism, that's basically about control and resources. One country takes over another to extract its wealth. But settler colonialism is a whole different animal. Its goal is not just to rule, it's to replace. The whole point is to eliminate the original people through violence, through assimilation, through law, and replace them with a new society. That logic of replacement is the engine that has driven so much of U.S. history. So once you start using that settler colonial lens, everything starts to look different. It changes how we understand identity, laws, and even time itself. Take a concept like blood quantum. I mean, it sounds like something out of a weird fantasy novel, but it was a real US government policy. They literally assigned people a fraction of so-called Indian blood. And the goal was brutally simple. As generations passed and people married non-natives, that fraction would get smaller and smaller until, on paper, Native people just ceased to exist. It was an attempt at bureaucratic erasure. But here's the crucial point. That plan failed. Spectacularly. As of the last U.S. Census, 9.7 million people identified as American Indian or Alaska Native. We are still here. Now, that number is complicated in its own right, but the message is clear. A system designed to make people disappear could not succeed.
This framework also just completely blows up our concept of time. Native history does not start in 1492. That's just one moment. For perspective, the oral histories of the Klamath people accurately describe the volcanic eruption that created Crater Lake, which happened 7,600 years ago. To put that in perspective, that's about 1,500 years before anyone even started building Stonehenge. When we talk about history going back since time immemorial, that's what we mean.
So let's just bust a few of these myths right now. Native history did not begin in 1492. The deep past is not some unknowable mystery. And probably the biggest myth of all, Native Americans did not vanish. The simple, powerful truth is, we're still here. And I love this quote because it gets at the heart of it all. This history isn't some dusty thing locked away in the past. It's alive. The past and the present are all tangled up together, like braids or DNA or, yeah, even Twizzlers. The policies of the past are still shaping the present, right now.
You know, when you get down to it, you can't tell the story of the United States without the story of Native America. They aren't separate things. They're woven together. So that leaves us with this final, massive question. When an entire system is designed over centuries for your elimination, what is it that holds a people together? What allows them not just to survive, but to endure?